Good morning. Thank you for joining us for this month's Coffee Talk. I'm Sean O'Brien, president of QuickRate. And as always, pleased to be joined by Steve Huntington. Steve, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks everyone for joining us. Sean said, I'm Steve Huntington, director of analytics here. I've spent my entire career working with community financial institutions, and about half of that time has been working with Sean here at QuickRate.
Thank you, Steve. Just a reminder, most of you who have attended previous Coffee Talks, but the Q&A box and the chat feature are probably the most effective ways to get your questions to us. We'll monitor those and either take them during the presentation or closer to the end. Just a reminder as well, we will send out a copy of the slides used today, as well as a link to the recording. So you can look for those early next week. Another reminder, again, most of you have been with us before, but this is just a way to kind of continue, or our way to allow you to continually kind of just stay up to date with what's happening, not only with our tool, with the CECL or the ACL questions that you might be having either internally or from an auditor or regulator. So again, we just want to keep the lines of communication open, and as best we can share any input, insight, information we're seeing or receiving with all of you. To that end, most of this year we've been asking polling questions. You may find that a lot of these are the same polling questions month to month, but we're curious just to see if things are changing. I think it's often said and understood, but the reality is a CECL is supposed to be a forward-looking, kind of analysis, right? And so I think, just getting a sense of how people are feeling, to me, can be more than anecdotal. It can give you a sense if maybe people or the industry's feeling different about their portfolio, and as a result, felt like we should just keep asking the questions just to see if there's been any change since the beginning of the year to now. So we're going to start with those polling questions. I'm going to launch the first one, which is, as we move through 2023, what concerns you the most this year? Deposit costs, credit quality, loan demand, or the valuation of your securities portfolio? So as before, we'll give this about a minute, and then we'll move on to the next question.
You're still not going to let me answer any of these, are you, Sean?
I'd be happy to let you answer.
Says I can't vote.
Yay. All right. We'll give this just another 5 or 10 seconds. But not surprisingly, deposit costs lead the way. 66% of you are concerned about deposit costs. Loan demand comes in second, credit quality, and securities portfolio valuation. So again, I think that's interesting, not surprising. I think certainly costs and just the impact on our NIM, something Steve's going to show you later in the presentation, a new tool in QwickAnalytics. But certainly as we move forward, I think most banks still feel pretty good about the credit quality in their portfolio, but obviously the rising deposit costs are a real ongoing issue. All right, so let's move to the next one. Do you anticipate your ACL or CECL reserves increasing or decreasing over the next 12 months? So we'll just give this again about a minute.
And this is the type of one we probably will try to be asking every month, because we're going to be seeing and tracking and letting you guys know how that's changing as we go through this year, through the first exam cycle, through the first initial adoption, and obviously through the economic changes.
Yeah, and again, I just think it'll be, I think valuable anecdotal information just to kind of see what your peers are thinking or feeling about their reserves. Okay, so we're just going to give this another 10 seconds or so. Let me end this one. So 42% of you see an increasing, 15% decreasing, and 43% don't anticipate a change. So thank you for answering that one. I'm going to go to the next question regarding Q factors. Do you anticipate adjusting your Q factors over the next 12 months? So kind of a similar question, but again, just trying to get a sense of where everybody's thoughts and feelings are about this. And I apologize if you can hear my chair creaking in the background. It's going to be the final day for this chair. It's been with me for almost 20 years, but it's starting to show its signs of age. Go ahead and end this one. 70% of you think yes, your Q factors will change. 30% seem no. So again, thanks for participating. And our final question today is just around the allowance. What percentage of loans is your allowance? So under 1%, 1 to 1 1/4, over 1 1/4. And again, this is, I think a little bit of just an understanding. We know the kind of the push and pull or the tug between auditors and regulators. Certainly the regulators would always just be happy to see an allowance of 1 to 1 1/4 or over 1 1/4. Sometimes the auditors don't feel quite as strongly about that, but I am curious to see where everybody is at this point in time. Okay, we'll go ahead and end this one. 25% of you are under 1%, 40 are between 1 and 1 1/4, and 34% are over 1 1/4. So again, thank you. We'll include this in the email that we send out, the results of these, so you have them. But again, appreciate you taking the time to answer those this morning. Again, part of what when we do these slides, it's to give you, leave a breadcrumb trail, if you will, so that you can not only see what we've been doing in terms of enhancements or updates, but also that you don't have to feel like you have to digest them all right now. We'll put these in the slides. So again, Steve and the IT team have been busy. Certainly, we've are continually trying to just improve or just tighten up the tool. Certainly we get ongoing requests from users on ways to improve it. We try to balance all that. We've certainly, as we made some of these changes, recognize some of those needed to be tweaked. So we appreciate everybody's patience as we, again, just try to continually improve the tool for you. But Steve, I don't know if there's anything here you want to just touch on before we move on to the next slide.
No, we have a little bit of detail on them, a couple more recent ones that I think are of interest on the next couple of slides. But most of these are ones, I don't believe there's any on this list that are completely new this month from last month's list, but I do want to talk a little bit about a couple of the more recent ones that I think are going to be very helpful during that first exam process and that first audit that you go through living in an ACL world.
Got it. All right. So the first one is this look back period flexibility. I think this one, I'm gonna let Steve talk about it, but just from my perspective, I think this is, got a lot of applications. I think it's important to recognize you don't have to use it. It's there as an enhancement, as an option. But I do think once you start to play around with it, and as we move forward, there's a number of different ways this can potentially help. So anyway, Steve, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody again a little bit about this tool.
Yeah, and this is as Sean said, all these enhancements, particularly this one. There's certain situations in which you might want to be you might want a discrepancy between the length of your look back period, right? The duration of your look back period and your warms. Some other models we've seen from other vendors have a static 3-year look back period, no matter what segment of the portfolio that you're looking at. That's not the take that we have on CECL. That when we speak with more and more auditors and examiners, just the other day we were speaking with another one, a lot of them like the concept of continuing to link the duration of the look back period to the warms, for all the reasons that we did in initially designing the tool. However, there's always exceptions to the rules. If you're a newer bank, if you don't have a long history, a long enough history to capture what the length of the warm is for, let's say, a mortgage portfolio, you might need to make a change to that. If there's been a significant management shift at your institution and you really want to focus on what's happened in the last 3 years, even if that means doing some additional math to get longer lifetime loss rates beyond the 3-year look back period, for example, a merger and acquisition, there's lots of specific kind of one-off situations where it may make a lot of sense to break that link and choose a look back period separately from the duration of the warm. Keeping in mind that if you decide to do that, you're going to want to document that, right? All the assumptions that you make, you're going to need to document. And so not making that assumption, not breaking that link is sort of how the tool works by default. And it makes it a little bit easier because it's not something else that you have to, or feel like you have to explain. However, we wanted to add that functionality in for those institutions that had a situation where that made sense to them. So that's why we added that functionality to the tool.
Yeah, and I would just add one other thing. Again, another scenario I like to use is, as Steve said, we've anchored ourselves, theoretically and symmetrically to the look back period. But for many of you, you may still, in that warm period, might not have experienced losses. So again, this gives you the ability to go back all the way to 2008, look at a much longer period of history, but then still condense it down to your current warm. And so again, I just think it gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility to get a sense of your own historical numbers in a much longer economic period of time.
Yeah. I mean, how much of your ACL would you like to be recorded as part of your history versus having to deal with on the Q factor part of it, right? So if it's easier for you or more intuitive for you to look all the way back to 2009 or 10, capture some losses you might have had over a decade ago because of the last time you had some losses, so that your entire ACE reserve is not coming 100% from Q factors, that's certainly a way to go. That's not the only way to go. That's not what the tool does by default, but now that is another option. So it's really how much work do you want to do on the defending length of lookbacks and historical versus how much work do you want to do on the Q factor side to get where you think or your auditors and examiners believe that you need to end up.
Yeah, and I think it's just again, it's just optional, but it's an additional insight I think the tool can give you, even if you continue to do it in the way we built it initially.
Yeah.
All right, so here's kind of a look back at, a screenshot of that, look back multiplier and just kind of the customizable look back period. So Steve, I don't know if you want to touch on anything here.
What we're talking about, that if you chose a different look back period than your warm, right? Let's say you've got a warm of, we're just looking at first liens, your mortgage loans, you got a 6-year warm and you decide you want to use an 8-year look back period, right? 4Q 2014 to 4Q 2022. So that's 8 years worth of look back, which is not the same as your warm because you wanted to look back a little further. In that case, we're going to calculate a aggregate loss rate over the entire look back period, but that's now 8 years worth of losses. So we're going to now multiply that by 6/8 or close to it. And so you can see the lifetime look back multiplier is 0.73. So we'll get the 8-year aggregate loss rate and then make it 6 years worth, right? Because what CECL requires is that you estimate losses over the remaining life of the loans. And you said that your remaining life is 6 years, even though you looked back 8 years.
So that's how the additional functionality works. By default, those multipliers are all going to be right around 1, right? Until and unless you change those look back durations. You're muted. You're muted. Chuck.
And we
There
had
you
a comment come in for banks with short history. I think it would be good to get the peer info over that time frame to compare or help support a Q factor. So essentially, our peer tool already is always going to mirror whatever look back period you incorporate. So it's going to move in lockstep. So we do already, in fact, do this because again, if you lengthen your customizable look back period, when you go to the peer tab, it's going to look at that longer period of time. So
it syncs everything that happens on the historical tab for your bank, the way the numbers are calculated, the length of a look back periods in relation to the warms. All that is the exact same methodology and steps and calculations that we do for the entire peer group. So when you go to the peer page, it's literally the exact analysis, but just all kind of added on top of each other for all the peers and averaged out to get that. So we make sure that how we're comparing your loss rate to your peers is always apples to apples.
Exactly. That's critical. Okay. Whoops. Did I just move too fast here? Okay. All right. So
No,
the next couple of things, again, as we, certainly some of you have already had preliminary questions around validation. Again, this is since the ACL or CECL is a 2023 item, for most institutions, it'll probably be part of your 2024, calendar year of the audit for 23. But nonetheless, certainly we're getting feedback. We're, continuing to talk to auditors about what they'd like to see and regulators. And so we've tried to continually, find ways to make the part of your part of the process easier. Certainly, again, from our perspective, all we can do is the SOC 1, right? And build for you what Steve has done now, an additional tool to help you have the ability to, independently validate many of the number or all of the numbers in our CECLSolver through an Excel tool. So, Steve, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Yeah, if you can. So we've had, as we start talking with more auditors, not about CECL and ACL conceptually, but the nitty gritty of exactly how all the loss rates are being calculated and them being able to, outside of the verification and the processes that we have to make sure that our data and calculations remain accurate, that being done either internally by the bank or externally by their auditors as additional model validation, pretty much. So this is a new Excel-based tool which uses our Excel add-in for any of you on the call who are utilizing the rest of our QA platform and not really just focusing on CECL. Hopefully you're already sort of aware of the Excel add-in tool that we have, which allows you to pretty much do almost all the analysis that we have in QA directly in an Excel environment. So for those of you who are hearing this for the first time or have never really played around with the Excel add-in, it's an excellent tool that you can get any of the data you can get in QA directly in Excel and build it into your own tools, your own models. This was our way of taking the entire historical lifetime loss rate. That's the part of CECL that's all the math based, right? Just validating all those historical calculations in a very detailed manner. There's a ton of data, right? There's quarterly charge-offs and recoveries by segment going back 15 years. That's 60 quarters, and then all the loan balances and then averaging out those loan balances. So there's a lot in there. So this Excel tool perfectly mirrors the historical data tab on our QA tool. It has all the same functionality. You plug in the warms, you change look back periods, beginnings or ends of look back periods. Everything recalculates on the fly, but it does it in an Excel environment where you can see and track and trace every single value directly back to the raw call report values that you had. So there's one tab on this Excel sheet which just says raw data. Those are your call report numbers, completely unadjusted for anything. Not even turned into quarterly, just left exactly as the call report. There are some intermediate calculations like, well, everything on the call report is year to date. We need quarterly data. And they don't give us net charge-offs, they give us charge-offs and recoveries. So some intermediary calculations. And then the formatted tab, which looks exactly like the one on the CECLSolver tool. And if you change the same numbers in here, it will match perfectly to the tool and just give you that additional validation you need so that you can take any number from the QA tool and match it back 100% to your call report using this tool. So hopefully it's not something that I'd suggest you use as part of your regular process on a quarterly basis, but if once a year you feel like you need to pull this up and go and have your auditor go through it so they can be comfortable with that, ongoing validation process, then this is a great tool for that. Sean?
Yeah, and then the other thing that you can do with it is certainly some of you have at times expressed the desire to maybe carve out a pool or make some changes to, historicals, for whatever reason, whether it was, change in underwriting, discontinuance of a certain loan type. This is a kind of an intermediate step for us to, again, give you that flexibility to address those types of issues that the CECLSolver doesn't have yet coded in, but this will allow you to make those kinds of changes as well. Steve, anything you want to add there?
Yeah. Good point. I told you how it works, but I didn't tell you some of the reasons you could, reasons you could use it. So again, one of the tabs on here is that raw call report data. We get questions all the time from institutions that say, we had a loss 6 years ago that wasn't really lost. Something got reclassified. It's still in the call reports. It's not something that we're going to ever refile that call report for, or we've been told we don't have to, or we just don't feel like it. You can go into your raw call report data and adjust things. Adjust historical balances or charge-offs or recoveries in any way that you find or can justify or feel is appropriate, right? If you want to carve out some government guaranteed balances, not just from the current portfolio, but from your entire historical record, you can do that using this tool. And then the output numbers that you get here, you can use to override on the interactive tool. So let's say you split off some numbers, added some custom pools, did some kind of one-off, very specific things, did it in the Excel environment, got lifetime loss rates here, saved it. Then on the interactive tool, you can go to the historical tab and just override the lifetime loss rates with what you calculated using the Excel tool. So it allows you to take a lot of very specific situations that we could never really anticipate or wouldn't really want to build into the interactive tool because it would just become too big of a monster of too complicated to use, right? The Excel environment obviously offers infinite flexibility in modifying some of those things. Sean?
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so industry ACL trends. So again, just kind of not only point out that there's a tool in here in QwickAnalytics on the homepage in the bank data and research section that again just kind of gives you the ability to kind of see some different loan metrics, capital metrics, performance metrics, again very quickly up against a peer group or some FRED data. So again, the idea is that while there's other places that this information can be seen in QwickAnalytics, this is just a nice way to kind of quickly throw it up on the screen and see it, and then very quickly manipulate it and maybe look at something else. You can look at it over a quarterly basis or an annual basis, but I find this to be a really interesting and helpful tool. So again, we just want to make sure everybody's aware of it. And Steve, here again, please share any thoughts you have.
Which we can talk about it on the screenshot, or I can share my screen for a minute, and you just want to keep it on your screen, or do you want to pull it up?
I'll stop sharing.
Okay, all right, sure, let's do it. I'll do it on my screen for a moment here. Figure out the right screen to share, always fun. All right, you seeing?
Yep, I'm seeing it.
Excellent. So this is the industry research page, right from when you first log into QwickAnalytics. On the table of contents on the left, you can choose industry research, and you can go, you can look at data at the segment level, just like you would for CECL. Let's say we're just pulling up, mortgage loans, And let's say we can look at charge-offs, net charge-offs, or we can go upstream. We can look at 30 to 89 days, see if we can get some ideas on credit trends before they start affecting losses. Do it as percentages. We can add in other performance metrics like the reserve if we wanted to. We can add a specific bank. It's a bank up in Maine that we add sometimes that we use. Hope they don't mind. We can look at short-term data. We can look at long-term data. I just reset it. I'm not sure why I did that. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second here to get that back from 10 to, oh yeah, refresh chart, not reset chart. But I didn't add a bank. All right, sorry, let me try this again. I'm not allowed to call them senior moments yet, am I, Sean?
No, you are not.
No, I'm not. Okay. So you can, this is just, 12 years worth of one individual bank's trends in 30 to 89 days past due just for mortgage loans. If we wanted to add a second bank, we could. Let's say we added North State Bank right here. I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, so I'm familiar with them. Adds them as a second bank. Let's say we want to also take, compare all the community banks in Arizona we'll just do the whole state, but you can do an MSA or a county or something else, and you want to research them as well. So now we can see the trends for individual banks, individual peers, state-based peer groups, custom peer groups, if you wanted to build your own custom peer group and see that trend. So you can add all these different banks and peer groups to any of the trends. Then you can overlay employment or economic data. We'll stick with Arizona. So we'll say, well, we want to see Arizona's unemployment rate, and we're going to overlay that as well. We'll make that red. So now we can see, a long-term trend of an economic trend, how it affects kind of upstream 30 to 89 days trends in a particular segment for your bank, your closest peer, your state-based peer group. There's just a lot you can very quickly and dynamically go through to research, not just credit, but we have some performance metrics in here as well. You can look at margin and whatnot. You can track reserve levels, ACL levels, not just charge-offs and recoveries and credit quality, but other ones as well. And if you want to see, everything in the platform, right, including CECL, is always one click away from being exported to a PDF or to an Excel environment. So something we built in after me spending too many years as an analyst trying to pull data off the internet with not a whole lot of success. So if I want to see the chart data, click here. There we go. That's how the ratio is defined. Here is how we calculate the ratio for each of the individual banks for the peer group. That's the Fred data. So you can get all the data points that pertain to your chart. It's a great tool for all this type of stuff. Sean?
Great. Am I take back the screen, Steve?
Yep.
All right. So let's pull this back up. Bear with me 1 second while I populate this. All right. Okay. So next up, again, I think, as we get here almost the end of July, we're getting probably the next week, everybody's gonna be busy filing those call reports, getting ready to do their calculations. We just wanted to maybe just take a second and just, pass along or just remind maybe some just different things to consider or remember as you're getting, ready to prepare those calculations. So, one of the ones we get quite a bit is just on, updating scenarios. So we just thought we'd kind of put this, step-by-step process. And Steve, if you want to just kind of talk through this.
Yeah, again, it's reminding people with as we continue to add options, add different things, bells and whistles, additional functionality to the tool for the audit process and everything else, of just what the basic steps are each time you're updating the tool. Step one, if it's and this, I'm going to assume this is kind of quarterly, so there's going to be new financial data to be added, right? New call report data, but certainly if you're updating this, or at least you want to give your board an idea of what direction it's headed in, and you're doing kind of a limited update on a monthly basis, that's totally fine as well. But the first step is always considering your warm calculations, right? Whether it's whether we're calculating your warm for you on a quarterly basis or whether you're doing it internally. Do we need to update the warm? And if we do, make sure you plug in those updated values. And then we'll probably get the follow-up question, because we always do. Well, how do I know when to update, how often to update my warm? A lot of thoughts, a lot of opinions, not a lot of good answers on that. It's a trial and error basis, right? And we've heard the same thing from the auditing firms that we work with and with the regulators, that if you're doing it, probably quarterly is where you want to start. If you're doing it every quarter for a few quarters and things are changing by 1 basis point, 2 basis points, staying very, very static, you may feel comfortable doing it semi-annually, as long as the powers that be sign off on such a choice. But that's done obviously right on the loan portfolio summary tab. You plug in your updated warms. Second step, enter current loan balances, right? If we're doing an ACL calculation as of a point in time, whether it's quarter end, month end, or July 21st, you want to plug in your current loan balances. Our tool has a drop, will allow you to choose any quarter end that exists, right? Historically. But if you want to do one as of today, we're obviously not going to have those current balances. So you can update your balances with whatever the as of date of this calculation is going to be. Also update any adjustments or exclusions. We have that separate column now where if you're backing out government guarantees or anything else, not individually assessed loans, that's another animal. But any other just adjustments to the current balances, update those in lockstep, obviously. Step 3, rolling your historical data to the most recently available. And I'm going to just kind of remind everyone how to do that. We see sometimes people sort of forget, next quarter's come and gone. They're updating their CECL analysis. They've maybe plugged in some new warms. They double check their Q factors, and then they hit, save as new. They save it as a new one, and they're done. Well, their old scenario was as of the date that they saved it. If we've gotten new call report data or new peer data or a new quarter has come and gone since you saved your last scenario, that most recent quarter is not going to be part of your old scenario when you first pull it up. We, as one of the things one of our mandates for building this tool is that we never change your data in your saved historical scenarios under any circumstances. And you need to know that we don't, because you need to know that once you save the scenario as of 6 months ago, that was your analysis and your justification for your reserve as of that date. So if a new quarter comes, you got to roll that historical information forward 1 quarter. I'll show you on the next slide exactly how to do that for those of you who aren't familiar with the quickest and easiest way to do that. Step 4, Q factors. Just revisit them, right? Start with your notes, right? Read your notes. Why did I make this adjustment? When did I make this adjustment? Does it still seem reasonable? Has anything changed? So the more notes that you make on that tab, because there's a note section, the easier and quicker this part of the process will be, in my opinion. And then finally, the last step, check your individually assessed loans for any changes in valuation and unfunded commitment assumptions if necessary. And then when you save it as a new scenario and give it a new date, right? We don't want to be saving over our old scenario, because then we'll never have a historical legacy of what our calculations were over time. We don't want to lose that data. So we don't charge by the scenario. So I expect that our users a couple of years from now are all going to have a nice long list of saved historical scenarios in there. And that was the way the tool was designed to work. Sean, any general thoughts on that before I talk about the historical data?
No, I think this is all good. I just wanted to make, again, anecdotally, I think Steve's initial point around the warms, I think quarterly is probably right for now, just because, again, I agree, if you're not seeing much of a change, you might get away with going to semi-annually. But I think what we're hearing and seeing anecdotally is that I shouldn't say many, there's a fair number of banks who are seeing extended warms here, because whether it's borrowers with the higher interest rates looking for maybe a little bit longer amortization, we're seeing an extension in some of the warms. So I think we want to make sure we're current, but I also think that might be, contributory to your Q factors, right? If we're recognizing that, borrowers are looking for a little bit of help, because of the higher interest rates, right? That's information. So, I think at a minimum, I think you want to see if that's actually happening in practice. So I think it's probably at this point, probably a good step to make sure you're looking at your warms on a quarterly basis.
Now's probably not the right economically to try to be extending your warm, that how often you do that, or stretching how long you do that. Because I'd say 2 years ago would have been a great candidate for for not recalculating the warm very often, because we've been in a flat to zero interest environment for an extended period of time, right? But we've had some significant changes in interest rates, which is why everyone's concerned about deposit costs right now. And when interest rates go up, prepayments go down, warms get longer. That's the math. So,
Yeah, so I think right now we want to probably calculate quarter. We got a question come in talking about the long list of scenarios. Any thoughts on an archive process to save those scenarios as the ones we utilized, or a folder system?
That's an excellent idea. We have, we've done some work on in that aspect of the tool with the ability to upload and save files, right? It's sort of like warehouse files that have to do with CECL right there in the tool. So giving some organization to that process of the save scenario, so you just don't have one drop down list that goes on forever. You should see how long my list is. Some organization there is an excellent idea, and we'll certainly take that under advisement and chat with our programmers about how the best way to accomplish such a feat.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve, for that question. Okay, Steve,
so this
is the common date range, which some of you may have already experienced, but we just want to kind of give you an update.
Yeah, so this is that part when I talk about when you're updating your scenario for the next quarter, and a new set, it's, let's say like a week and a half from now, there's going to be June 30th loss date for the entire industry available in the tool, right? As soon as everyone finishes filing their call reports, boom, the tool's updated. There is a 630 column for all the peer data, for all of your historical data. But it's not automatically, the tool's not automatically going to flip your dates and start using that until you tell it that you want it to, for the reasons that I explained earlier. The quickest and easiest way to update all the historical stuff and peer stuff for June 30th, come a week and a half from now, would be to go to the historical tab. I know the pop-up box kind of hides some of the stuff behind it, so I had to just kind of imagine it here with me. On the historical tab, there's a button that says set common date range. I've circled it there on the right-hand side. When you click on that, you get this pop-up box. This just allows you to kind of deal with your look back periods all in one spot. So you click on that, set the common to end quarter, and right now they all say 1Q 2023, but in a week and a half, you'll be able to click on that and choose 2Q 2023, and then click apply changes. And if you do that, the look back period for every segment of the portfolio will now include June 30th. So that's the quickest and easiest way, with just 2 clicks, to make sure that a new scenario that has new quarterly historical data for the peer group and for your institution gets updated. We've seen people just kind of forget to take this step, and they've run a whole CECL analysis, but that historical time frame did not include the most recent quarter available because they didn't do this. Now, you should get a hint. There's a visual hint that you haven't done this. When you look at the historical tab, you'll see all those blue shading that shows a look back period, and you'll see the blue shading doesn't include the most recent quarter. So that'll be your hint that you have not included the most recent data, and you can take these 2 clicks and do it all in one step. Now, you don't have to do the set common date range. You can just go to each of your segments there on the historical, click on the drop down box for each segment, and change it to 2Q. Once it's available in about a week and a half. This is just a way to batch it, so to speak, and do it in a single click. That's it. That's all I wanted to point out there.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, Mustafa. Thanks for the question. We got a question is, when there's a negative historical rate, is it recommended we use a 0 so it does not skew the Q factors in lowering CECL for that particular loan category? My recommendation is always yes, to make an adjustment to bring that historical rate to zero. I do it through the Q factors and just add an adjustment for, adjust net, recovery to zero, right? Because again, I don't think you want to start with at a minimum your historical rate being zero and not a negative number. Steve, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, it's which way you want to handle it. Do you want to? I don't like whenever humanly possible, I don't like changing or manipulating any of the historical data, even if I have to explain why it looks weird. I think I prefer to show it as is. If it's negative, it's negative. You've recovered 23 basis points, let's say, over the last 5 years in aggregate. That's a fact. And then in our Q factors, you have a separate Q factor, which just says, reverting negatives back to zero. And so you see the historical as is, unmolested, unadjusted. You see an adjustment that's explained that gets it to zero, and then you have your other Q factors. You could, as an alternative, just go to the bottom of your historical tab and override the lifetime historical loss rate to make it zero instead of negative 23 basis points. But that wouldn't be my preferred method, but that's certainly an option if you just, let's say your auditor, your examiner just can't get their head around a negative loss rate anywhere in your summary analysis. You can zero it out upstream if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. So, in we think a timely way, certainly one of the polling questions this morning was around deposit costs, and that's, certainly of concern to most of you in one form or another. A new tool that we've, have kind of released out there and we'll be talking about here in an upcoming webinar is an interactive new tab called NIM decomposition. And essentially it kind of breaks apart, and I'll let Steve do a much better job explaining it, but it kind of just tears apart all the factors that are going into your NIM.
Yeah.
So you can better understand it. So Steve,
and I'd like to show this one interactively too, because to fit it on the screen, I cut off a deposit half, which was the leading question that brought us here. So let me share my screen again here.
Yep.
Number 2, there we go. All right, so that lives right here, NIM decomposition. Starting on Monday, there's going to be there's going to be 2 pages. I have a screenshot of what that second page is going to be, and you guys your Alco committee is going to love it. But this is the one that was live. We just put live last week. Kind of did a soft opening of it, so to speak, last week. It just shows it, it's a NIM decomposition. So it shows your numerator, right? Your interest income or expense over whatever period or in whatever duration. So you can go back in time. You can choose quarterly, year-to-date, or trailing 12 months values. If I wanted to click back on, 9/30/2022, boom, these values are now for 9/30/2022. And if you click on any particular segment, or not segment, earning asset, the charts over here will match whatever you choose. So you can kind of look at you versus the peer group, and you can say, all right, for the first quarter, for my total loans, 45 million in interest income, $4 billion average balance. This is my annualized yield. All the ratios are always annualized, right? So you can compare across different durations. And you'll notice we have some kind of color coding here, like we have on some other pages. It shows your ratios, but it puts them in a peer-based heat map, so to speak. Meaning it compares your 3.89% yield on interest-bearing due from deposits and compares it to the peer group. This is UBPR peer group 3, but you can choose any of your custom peer groups you'd like to see your ratio and where it stands on the worse than average to better than anybody else in your peer group kind of a basis. And you can see that trend here, and you can do long-term trends like 5-6 years or quarterly trends. So it's a great analysis for looking at your NIM. Now, this is not really comparing 2 specific periods of your margin, which is what you see in a lot of those like 10 Qs and Ks from the SEC filing bigger institutions. But we're going to get to that in a second. This is just a great tool, and you can see here on the deposit side, on the liability side, their cost of deposits over the last 4 quarters has gone from 15 basis points to 1.31%. So hence the concern about deposits. And it ends. We also, for the first time ever, are showing things on a fully tax equivalent basis as well. So you have the option of looking at it on a stated basis or a fully tax equivalent basis also. And those FTE adjustments, we use the same methodology from the UBPR report. So however the FFIEC does it on their UBPR, when they present things on an FTE basis, they use an FTE adjustment. We're using that exact same methodology here. So those will match the UBPR's, that adjustment will match perfectly. And so that's the existing page. Again, just like everything else, you can always PDF it, Excel it, or print it and have it look clean. Now, Sean, if I can give you the screen back so you can go to the next slide, because I don't have that one. That one's not live yet. It'll be live on Monday. And we can, but I'll show you what it's going to be. It's a second margin related page. This is an analysis of change, right? This is where you can choose any two periods you want and see, you know, the income, the balance, and the yield or cost. And so you can choose I chose 6/30/2022 versus 6/30/2021. I think I did MRQ, but you could choose any periods you want for those two pieces separately. And then on the right-hand side, you get something that you also see on some of the SEC, like the 10Qs and Ks, you know, the net change, how much of it is coming from rate versus volume, right? The looking at your change in income expense in that particular earning asset or interest-bearing liability, what part of the change came from changes in rates and what part came from changes in volume. And the math is explained in the footnote as well. Then we just highlight here what the change in the actual yield was, right? This was 26 basis points and 11 basis points a year earlier. So it went up by 15 basis points. That's good. And despite that, so the yield went up, even though the volume went down, right? The interest income on this went down to 83 from 99. So you actually had a net decline in interest income, but it's on 1/3 of the average balance, right? They had 1/3 amount of that amount there. So the yield actually improved despite those things. So a lot of good information here. And then last but not least, this right here is probably going to be a new concept for a lot of you on the call, but the Federal Reserve had done some research and done some more kind of next level calculations to try to put a hand to help people understand for their change in yield or cost, what contribution did it have to the margin? So like, you know, for this particular earning asset, its increase in yield or decrease in yield or cost or whatever, how much impact did that one earning asset have on the entire margin, on you know, the change in the entire margin. So that's a really helpful statistic. We have a definition and an explanation and a little article from the Federal Reserve that explains how it's calculated and how it can be very helpful, especially in ALCO type planning. But we thought that was a really cool statistic to add in there. So come Monday, when you click on the NIM decomposition page on QA, you'll have two options. You'll be able to choose the page I just showed you, which just has, you know, your margin composition for one period and a bunch of colorful charts and peer comparison, or the second page, which has no peer data whatsoever. It's simply you comparing two of any two periods you want side by side, and then looking at how things have changed, why they've changed, and what impact those changes for each asset or liability has had on your overall change in margin. John, did that make sense?
Yep. So yeah, so like I said, so this is, again, we wanted to make you aware of it. We certainly will be coming, you know, and talking a lot more about it in future QwickAnalytics webinars, but just wanted to make everybody aware today, at least of its existence and what's, you know, what we're trying to do here. So Steve, there was a follow-up question on your talking about changing the historical rate to 0 on the loan summary tab.
Yeah, hold on. Give me a second here. So that's done on the historical analysis. So not, you know, the loan portfolio summary has that first column A what is your historical lifetime loss rate, right? That's the result of all the historical calculations that you did. If you go to the next tab, the historical analysis tab, that's all the details, right? Where you're calculating it. You scroll down to the bottom and the last calculation it shows is what is your historical lifetime loss rate, but you'll notice those are blue and overridable. So right there, if you had a negative, if the math shows that you have a negative historical lifetime loss rate, on the bottom right of the historical tab, you can override that negative balance with a 0 right there. As soon as you do that, you go back to the loan portfolio summary page and it'll show a 0 there as well.
All right, thanks, Steve. Any questions that we go ahead and submit those now? I did have one that came in yesterday from Ted. Ted, thanks for sending it in. This is not as much a question, but just he had a comment from an auditor who said we should make our ACL calculation more accurate by separating loan pools for secured loans. And so again, in the adjustment and exclusion column, you can do that. And so that's part of the flexibility. You can add additional loan pools, but many of you are already separating out SBA or CD secured or other types of loans. I think in part of Ted's question was, he would like to be more conservative and not break them out, but sometimes, the auditor is going to have a say in that. So while I personally would agree with Ted's approach, sometimes our auditors are going to, have us do that. But within the tool, you can go ahead and separate out those CD secured or other type of enhanced secured loans.
And I would always suggest, always suggest doing that. I think it's just a more accurate, gives you more, a more accurate reflection of what loans are we supposed to be reserving on and how much, right? If you're trying to keep, if you're trying to keep your reserve up and you don't want to, back those out, well, you can still back them out and then have a slightly more aggressive Q factor adjustment somewhere along the way to make up the difference. But but I've heard crazy stories of examiners saying that you need to keep a reserve on your fully secured loans. Especially with it was an examiner for the NCUA. We were helping a credit union and they had share secured loans, fully share secured loans on their books. And their examiner was demanding that they keep some sort of reserve on those for some reason that I can't really think about. And so that was an interesting conversation to have, why we should be reserving for things that have a 0% chance of loss. But I won't get too deep into the details on it. But yeah, that's where and how you would make the adjustment.
Yeah. So the follow-up question that's come in then is how would the historical data break out the unsecured versus secured? So to me, they'd be one and the same, right? Because you could adjust the balances now in our new Excel tool to change potentially the loan balances, but I wouldn't anticipate you'd have had any losses on the secured portion of it. So it really, the Excel tool that Steve has built, you could change the loan balances to reflect those because there's actually within that tool. If I go back to the slide here real quick.
Well, you can do it either with two ways. You can add it as a separate segment and then do some math, or you can simply just override all your balances by subtracting them out manually, for every quarter going all the way back in time.
But you can see here, you're going to have the ability to create your own pools in this as well.
Yeah.
So if you
and this is just a summary. The reason why you only see annual columns here is because that's the summary tab in Excel. When you go to the detailed tab in Excel, the detailed Excel tab, that will have every quarterly balance going all the way back to the beginning because it has everything that you need to fully calculate this. This shows annual years because it's supposed to mirror the historical tab on the CECLSolver tool that also summarizes by year, just so that the table doesn't roll on forever. But when you go to the other tabs, there's a lot of columns.
Yeah. And so again, if you want to get a little bit more detail, this just gives you a little bit more flexibility and it's an additional use of that tool. Okay. Let's see. I don't see that we've had any additional questions come in. So I just want to remind you, we do have a liquidity webinar next week on, I think it's the 26th of Tuesday or Wednesday.
Hey, Sean.
26th. Yeah.
Should we, I know everyone loves talking about unfunded commitments. Did we want to briefly mention assumptions around unconditionally cancelable stuff there?
Sure.
Okay.
Do you want the
It's
screen or
everyone's
you
favorite
want?
topic. I know I couldn't let everyone go without chatting about it for just a minute. Should I share?
Yeah, I would
should
say
probably
probably
share
share
my
the screen.
screen.
Hey, while you're doing that, and then just a reminder, we are doing a webinar on IntelliCredit and the Portfolio Analyzer. I think this is really an exciting tool. We're going to have a chief credit officer from one of our customers on the webinar as well, explaining how he uses the tool day to day in his bank. So I'd certainly encourage you to register for both. Again, even if you can't attend, if you register, you'll get a copy of the slides and a link to the recording. But I think certainly encourage you to attend both of those. But for those again looking for a little bit more data from your flat file, your own loan data, certainly encourage you to show up for that IntelliCredit webinar. All right, so Steve, take it away.
Yeah. Hold on a second. Go back to share my screen again. So this is something that we're planning on doing, and we just wanted to give you guys a little bit of a heads up. We never got really great guidance early on about unfunded commitments, right, as it pertains to how we're going to have to do things differently under CECL. It was always a bit wishy-washy, never super detailed. We still wanted to put a module together for all of you to help you, to give you justification for whatever, hopefully pretty small value you'd come up with here as a part of your overall ACL picture, because it is a new line item on the call report. We do have to put something, and we do have to have a reason for it. So that was the genesis of this as a separate module in the tool. We wanted to provide guidance as much as possible to help you along the way. One of those pieces of guidance was, well, you have your total unfunded commitments. We get that from the call reports. That's something you guys had to fill out. But there's whatever portions of those unfunded, unused commitments are unconditionally cancelable. We can net out. We don't have to worry about it from an ACL standpoint. You guys probably all know this by this point. But, well, what meets the definition of unconditionally cancelable? The regulators and the auditors have been fighting it out. We started our tool taking, with a lot of guidance from both FASB, but also from the regulators, OCC, the FDIC, and the regulators we found tend to be a little bit more liberal on what you can assume is unconditionally cancelable, like HELOCs being more likely to be potentially unconditionally cancelable. The auditors, the more that we talk to, seem to be digging in on their assertion that HELOCs are not very often unconditionally cancelable. And so by default, what our tool did was it looks at all your total unfunded commitments. It suggests that you might back out the HELOCs and maybe some other ones. And it suggests that based upon, you don't plug all this into your call report, but you do plug into your call report, your totally unconditionally cancelable unfunded commitments is a line item on your call report. So we look at that one line item and we suggest, well, it's probably coming from here and here, right? If you got 320 million of unconditionally cancelable on your call report, it's probably coming from these segments. So we pre-populate those and we let you know right now, we explain what we did and how you should consider it and how you should revise it if necessary. The more information we get about HELOCs being less likely to be unconditionally cancelable or needing a lot of documentation to go that route, and the fact that the call reports are now not asking for as much information for you guys as part of the, what was it, John? The Great Paperwork Reduction Act of whatever year that was, that seems to have increased the size of our call reports instead of decreasing it somehow. Has made it that some of these line items that helped us give you some of these suggestions are now either no longer required for smaller institutions or only required like semi-annually, as if that saves us that much time and energy instead of quarterly. So we're going to be modifying this to, we're just going to be zeroing these, the unconditionally cancelable kind of default values. We're going to be zeroing them out. You have to decide, you've always had to decide what actually meets the definition of unconditionally cancelable. But that guidance we were giving you to get you started is the auditors are pushing back on some of it, and you have to calculate the total amount for your call report anyway. So I assume that you guys should be knowing where it's coming from. So we didn't want to assume for you anymore. So we decided, and relatively soon, we're just going to be zeroing out. Now, if I zeroed out this right now for this bank and said, well, now, no, none of their HELOCs are unconditionally cancelable, I'm going to get this little pop-up that says, hold on, you reported 319 million of total unconditionally cancelable on your call report, but now you've only got 4 million worth here. So where's the rest of it? That's just a reminder. I know it sounds like a big red scary warning thing. It's just to remind you that this doesn't seem to match up with what you plugged in on your call report last quarter. So you can ignore that if you want to. If you want to be super conservative, you can just zero them all out, and that'll end up with a little bit of a higher reserve level for for the unfunded commitment. Of course, that lives in a whole different area. It's on the liabilities section of the call report, so it doesn't affect your loan, ACL, or anything else. But I just wanted to give you guys a heads up that that's been an ongoing part of discussions between examiners and auditors, and the auditors seem to be being more strict about it as we go, and so our guidance is going to be back towards, listen, you need to look at this yourself. You need to decide. And so we're going to be zeroing those out. We're going to let you know what your total balance was on your call report. And then you can decide if you want to match these individual segments up to that, or if you just want to be more conservative. Sean?
And just a reminder, typically what we've seen, at least in the first quarter, and we'll see what happens here in the second quarter, but, I think banks are kind of anywhere from 0 to 25 basis points on these unfunded commitments, right? Some are saying, hey, I don't need anything. Others are just kind of, applying a flat basis points to it as well. So just an FYI there.
The only ones that we see that are always now, credit card lines are the definition of unconditionally cancelable. So if you have a bunch of unused credit card lines, I'm pretty safely say that those can be backed out. And usually overdraft protection commitments as well, because you almost always meet that definition. But beyond those, we're just not really comfortable, kind of pre-plugging those in anymore, given the dynamics of how of what we're hearing.
Yeah. And hey, Steve, while you're on, you got the screen live, just maybe click on the My Bank tab and show everybody where that NIM page is while I answer this next question that came in. Is there any word on how regulators are responding to large excess reserves? So for me, what I've seen and heard is the regulators are more accepting of large excess reserves. In some instances, we've seen auditors who are less comfortable with it. Some of the auditors are suggesting that, that there's no guidance or regarding the allowance of unallocated reserves or just excess reserves. And while that's potentially true, that was also true in the ACCL. And so to me, if an auditor accepted a large unallocated previously and isn't now, they're grasping at something that it's a change in position for them, because there was nothing in the ACCL that allowed or suggested you could do that, but it became a matter of practice. And so for the most part, we haven't seen, given the fact that most people are anticipating, some type of credit uncertainty over the next 12 months, and that CECL's supposed to be forward-looking. Most regulators certainly haven't had a problem with unallocated or large excess reserves. Some auditors have. So Scott, to your question, that's kind of what we've seen and heard. But I think, personally, I would push back pretty hard if someone's asking me to take money out of the reserve at this point of the cycle. So again, Steve just pointed out, you can go to your My Bank page, that NIM decomposition tab. Now, as he said, there's only one graph here today. There'll be an additional analysis.
It'll look like this
Monday.
On Monday, it'll look like this. It'll have a little plus, and then it'll have two options down below, as opposed to just a single option. But so if you want to play around with it today, you can go right. You can. This is all live today. Again, you can use your custom peer groups. The one thing I don't know if I pointed out, these are your ratios, right? Just kind of. But if you're like, well, okay, it's kind of in the middle. What's my percentile rank? Well, you can click on PCT ranks. Well, they're in the 58th percentile. So they're slightly above average, right? In the yellow zone is 40 to 60, but if you want to know exactly what it is, well, it's the 58th percentile.
Okay, so let me get back to let me take the screen back, Steve.
Sure.
I think we're towards the end of our slides here. So
Yeah.
just, we're getting on a little over an hour, so we'll let everybody get back to their day. So again, just a reminder about the webinars tomorrow. For all of you who, are following us with CECL, I really encourage you to attend that IntelliCredit webinar. We are going to try to similarly, kind of get on a more regular pattern of talking about some of the tools that are available in IntelliCredit. Obviously, we perform third-party loan reviews, but there's applications that you can use internally at the bank. So we're excited to show you those both for internal review, annual review, and portfolio analytics. So we're really excited about this tool and would love to have you start taking a look at it. We'll be back again next month at the end of August for Coffee Talk, August 25th. And so any final words, Steve, before we let everybody have their day back?
No, I was just gonna say, if it's any hotter on August 25th, we're canceling because it's about, I think it's about 150 degrees everywhere. It's Coffee Talk, so, I'm drinking my hot coffee, but
it's a heat wave. All right. Well, thank you all very much for attending today. Please let us know if you have any questions. Have a great weekend. Stay cool, and we'll see you next month. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.